honesty, I don't feel that what I've done is a crime. And I think it's illogical and irresponsible for you to sentence me to prison. Because when you think about it, what did I really do? I crossed an imaginary line with a bunch of plants.
Johnny Depp is a small-time pot dealer who stumbles into a career as a big-time cocaine distributor in Blow. It's one of 5 new movies we'll review this week. I'm Richard Roeper, columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times. The character played by Johnny Depp in Blow is George Young, who's currently doing life in a federal prison. The movie is based on his true life story, how an aimless kid from Massachusetts drifted to California, began dealing a little marijuana, and ended up allegedly supplying 85% of all the cocaine that came into America in the late 1970s. His career begins a decade earlier when his girlfriend introduces George and his buddy Tuna to a hairdresser and pot dealer.
Furby, he is yummy. He looks just like a Ken doll.
That's Franca Potente from Run Lola Run as the girlfriend and Paul Reubens as the pot connection. Business is good, and before long, George is in Colombia making a deal with the infamous Pablo Escobar, head of the Medellin drug cartel.
How much can you transport?
Again, this is a language that I would have to discuss with my partner, but 300 kilos, so that's $3 million.
In Colombia, George meets the beautiful Mirtha, played by Penelope Cruz, and soon they're married and showing off their mansion to his parents, Rachel Griffiths and Ray Liotta.
If you don't mind me asking, how much is one of these? It's got to cost a fortune.
It's a family heirloom, Ma.
I've seen these in magazines. They don't come cheap.
Mirtha comes from a very wealthy family.
George Young makes and loses millions of dollars in Blow, but apart from his bank balance, he's just not a very interesting character. Johnny Depp does what he can with this sad sack loser, and director Ted Demme creates a good sense of time and place, but George Young's story adds up to one defeat after another, and he's totally obsessed with himself. Here's a man whose drugs created an epidemic that destroyed millions of lives, and he's not even an interesting villain.
I think he's a fascinating character.
Oh, yeah?
I think this is a near-great movie. It has a lot of echoes of Goodfellas. It's not quite as good as Goodfellas, but
Not quite.
It has the same kind of rhythm to it. Ted Demme's camera shots, the way he does it, the narration from Depp's character. But I think Depp is fantastic in this role, and we also see that this guy's very brave, maybe for a bad cause, but he's got more guts than anybody else, and he flies through these situations where anybody else would be so scared, and he carries the day. Again, for a bad end, but I'm finding this to be a very fascinating character.
Well, you know, you mentioned Goodfellas, and Ray Liotta is in this movie, so that's a reminder of that Scorsese
And he's really
film.
good in this movie.
And Goodfella is infinitely better than this movie.
Well, I don't think
because it's so much better. It's better visual, but it's also better in terms of its narrative story because it creates an interesting character. I swear that this guy, I don't think he's particularly brave. He does what he has to do in order to stay alive in a situation that he put himself into. He's constantly making wrong decisions. He always trusts the wrong people. He makes the same mistakes over and over. He gets arrested for stupid reasons, and then he winds up in jail.
Well, Henry Hill makes a lot of mistakes in Goodfellas, too, and that's one of the fascinating things about these guys. They can't help themselves. And I do think there's a lot of dimension to this character.
If he were importing bananas from Colombia instead of cocaine, would they have made this movie?
No, but he's not
No.
importing bananas. He's importing drugs, and it's
So
a true
what?
story, and it's fascinating to find out how cocaine came into this country. I think this is a near-great movie. I think you really missed the boat on this.
Okay.
All right, our next movie is All Access. It's a colorful and lively concert medley opening in the large format IMAX theaters around the country. Forget about the front row. All Access plunks you on stage to share the joy of creation and improvisation with pop stars ranging from Kid Rock to Al Green, from Macy Gray to B.B. King. There's some wonderful time-lapse photography of Chicago Soldier Field before, during, and after a concert by the Dave Matthews Band, for example, and some revealing backstage insights from veteran rockers like Sting.
You know, the whole thing about America is it's such a mystical place, really. But to have made it here, to be celebrated here is an amazing thing.
But the heart and soul of All Access is in the performances, as when Mary J. Blige joins George Clinton and P-Funk. And the pairing of Rob Thomas and the legendary Carlos Santana led to the #1 hit, Smooth. The fusion of ethnic and musical influences is a constant theme here. Sting hooks up with Cheb Mami for the exotic Middle Eastern flavor of Desert Rose. B.B. King joins a host of younger musicians for Rock Me Baby. Just as riveting are the solo performances by a barefoot Sheryl Crow and a typically enigmatic Moby whose porcelain rings down the curtain. Good thing is, too, if you're not a fan of a particular act, at least you have to sit through only one song. There are no encores in All Access, which really is my only complaint. I would have liked to see another hour of this.
You know, when I saw the Rolling Stones in At the Max, they did give you another hour. They had an intermission because they have to change those enormous IMAX reels, but they gave you the second act. And IMAX is a great format for a concert film because the sound is all around you, and you're right there on the stage. At one point, Sheryl Crow was playing, and I can read the type on the sticker inside her Gibson guitar.
Yeah,
now, that's a good picture.
That's pretty amazing. And, you know, the other thing is, with the high cost of concerts these days, you see Davey Matthews Band, it probably costs you $100 to see them, so you get to see a lot of these acts that a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford. So I think it's a terrific use of the IMAX format.
Plus the mixture of the veteran performers and the newcomers and the ethnic groups so that you get a lot of cross-cultural.
Yeah, a lot of people say that the pop music right now isn't all that great. You see this and you realize there's a lot of great stuff out there.
Later in the show, Morgan Freeman tracks a headline-seeking kidnapper in Along Came a Spider.
He's turned it into a game.
And coming up next, Christina Applegate welcomes medieval time travelers to modern Chicago in Just Visiting.
It's a red dragon! What the hell are you doing? We have killed it!
I've lost them in the corridors of time.
A wizard makes a big mistake in the new comedy Just Visiting and sends a knight and his serf time traveling from 12th century Europe to 21st century Chicago. The movie is a remake of The Visitors, the most popular comedy in French history, and once again stars Jean Reno and Christian Clavier as fish out of water in the modern world. When the knight meets his distant descendant, played by Christina Applegate, her boyfriend offers them a ride, and Reno gets medieval on him.
Run behind the chariot, peasant.
Yes, master!
He can't run behind the car.
He cannot ride with us. He's not noble.
Yes, but he has to ride the car.
He's very fast.
We're taking the freeway. You can run 70 miles an hour, can you?
Have good boots.
The knight may be baffled by this new world, but he's not defeated by it. He fights back by doing what he does best.
He's getting away.
I like Just Visiting better than the original, maybe because the French accents make the visitors seem more like outsiders, while the subtitles level the playing field. Or maybe it's just because the movie is so brawny and swaggering and confident and yet sort of sweet and good-hearted. Renault plays his knight as steadfast and unyielding, but Clavier adapts quickly to the modern world. He says he doesn't want to return to the Middle Ages. He wants to stay here in Chicago where he can eat donuts and get men's fashions at rock-bottom prices.
This was a terrible movie.
No, it wasn't.
There's one joke in this movie. It's okay, like you said, the fish out of water. These guys get transported to modern times. So Christina Applegate's character has to do things like leave them alone with modern appliances so things can splatter all over her. And even after she's had about 3 experiences knowing these guys look like they really don't know what they're doing, she's still okay, go in the bathroom. And they're bathing out of a toilet.
Well,
or they're drinking the Chanel perfume. Oh, come on, Roger. That's the same kind of lame brain stuff we've seen in a lot of the American comedies this year.
Movie is
where
not.
people get stuff dumped on them, where they fall down, where there's pratfalls.
This is a real contrast to those bad American comedies in which they use the comedy of situation and personality in order to show these people trying to deal with the modern world in their own medieval, steadfast, sincere, funny way. It's very funny.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding. I laughed a lot during this movie.
I didn't laugh once during this movie. And as always, we have to have the boyfriend being such a cartoon caricature of a bad guy, and the next door neighbor, she's such a ditz, and this sidekick wearing this bad Dudley Moore wig and turtleneck thing, and he's dancing in the
practically
clubs.
stole the movie. He was so funny.
Oh, I didn't. He's
really funny.
I found this to be a huge disappointment. I thought it was just terrible.
I think you're totally out to lunch. Coming up next, Morgan Freeman is back as Detective Alex Cross in Along Came a Spider.
Everybody down.
Secret Service agent Monica Potter can't prevent the kidnapping of a senator's daughter in Along Came a Spider, a jigsaw puzzle thriller with a lot of mismatched pieces. Morgan Freeman reprises his role from Kiss the Girls as profiler detective Dr. Alex Cross in a story based on another of James Patterson's novels. Even though Cross is a legend in his field, the kidnapper known as Sanji actually invites him to the party. He wants the notoriety. Joining Cross on the trail is Potter's naive young agent, Jesse.
A missing picture.
Our Mr. Sanji has a sense of humor. He turned it into a game.
Sanji laid the groundwork for the crime by getting a teaching job at the little girl's school and wearing a disguise every day for 2 years before springing into action. So even if the kidnapping thing doesn't work out, he was on his way to a pension.
Imagine the patience, the dedication.
You sound like an admirer.
Well, he's like a spider. And I happen to like spiders.
There's also a ransom sequence that's almost identical to the one in Mel Gibson's Ransom, with Cross having to dash from one locale to another per the kidnapper's telephoned instructions.
Hey! Hey! Don't answer that!
And the money drop is a carbon copy of a scene from Kurosawa's High and Low. With its 90-degree bends in the plot and its kettle of red herrings, Along Came a Spider has lofty aspirations, but the jolts are either completely predictable or just ludicrous. Now, the great Morgan Freeman is much too somber for this silly romp. As for Monica Potter, she's a fresh presence, but she's 0 for 2 this year with the unfunny head over heels and now the unconvincing Along Came a Spider.
Well, I did like Morgan Freeman's performance because he has a certain gravitas and conviction that he brings to Dr. Alex Cross. I like the character.
Sure.
But, you know, there are two kinds of loopholes in this movie. The first kind is the loophole you think you've spotted, and then the plot kind of reverses around and you figure out it wasn't a loophole. And then there's the loophole that you think about after the movie is over. And sometimes I got really confused trying to figure out which loopholes were which.
Yeah.
For example, at one point, not to give away too much, Dr. Cross says that he mentioned a $12 million ransom to the guy, and the guy should have known it was $10 million. And I'm thinking, if I follow this correctly, the guy shouldn't have known there was a ransom at all.
And I'm tired of these movies where the kidnappers have these elaborate home setups with pictures and, you know, this whole kind of shrine.
Was that the kidnapper's home?
Well, you know, we don't want to give that away.
Was that the kidnapper's home?
That's the thing. And then again, also, without giving too much away, I'm really tired of movies where people leave the key evidence on a computer disk. Nobody ever hits the delete or just throws out the little disk.
They have to find the right Charles Lindbergh homepage in order to get to the video cam of the kidnapper's home if it was his home. Do you know how many home pages there are for Charles Lindbergh? None. He doesn't have a home page. How many hits on Google? 1,300,000.
Yeah, well, www.unbelievablemovie.com sums this up, okay?
Now let's have a cable alert. Upcoming on cable, our next movie is one of the angriest, most painful documentaries I've ever seen, and it's one of the best. It's titled Just Melvin, Just Evil. It debuts on HBO Cable in 2 weeks, and it tells the story of a man named Melvin Just, who as a husband, father, stepfather, and grandfather repeatedly committed incest and violent abuse against almost every single member of his family. The story is told by 2 of the survivors, his daughter, Anne Marie, and her son, James Ronald Whitney, who directed the film.
She's down on the floor. She had long hair, and he's dragging her across the floor, saying he was going to take her out and run over with a car. And I ran in his closet and got his 12-gauge shotgun and pulled the trigger. It just clicked because it wasn't loaded.
As family members, the filmmakers have access to everyone involved, including Melvin's wife, who was Anne's mother and stood by while abuse took place.
Bobby recalled when she was in a little stroller, Grandpa Just would drive in, and you had warned Bobby to act like she was asleep. What was that all about?
She was molesting her.
The litany of incest and abuse continues as we see a family devastated by this man, and what is incredible is that the filmmakers actually confront Melvin Just himself, and he talks to them on camera.
How evil are you?
Do you want to see?
Tell me.
I say, do you want to see?
You put your hands down my mother's panties.
There are a lot of movies about abuse, but very rarely do you get to confront the abuser in person on the screen. Not long after that conversation, Melvin dies, and the funeral service is one of the most bizarre I can ever imagine, with a preacher mouthing platitudes while the family seethes or drinks or weeps in rage. This movie is one of those incredible documents you can barely imagine being made. Its story is horrifying, and the testimony of the survivors, including James Whitney and his mother, Ann, is both grave and inconsolable. What's liberating is they actually confront their molester, and they nail him right on camera. The name of the documentary is Just Melvin, Just Evil. It will play twice on HBO, starting April the 22nd, and you have never seen anything like it.
I have several major problems with this. One is that they don't when they confront him, it's a letdown. And all of these family members who dance on his grave during the funeral, why don't they do something while he's still around? I'm also really offended by the way this movie was presented, in particular, a little girl who goes on camera and says, "I was molested." And I think the filmmaker is exploiting her almost as badly as she's been exploited, apparently, by this Melvin Just. So I don't like this movie at all, and I think that it really just delves into Jerry Springer territory, and just because it's shot in documentary format, and we see this guy playing the piano in between these segments, to me, it was still like just a Jerry Springer episode.
Oh, it wasn't Jerry Springer at all. I mean, the little girl was molested, and she might be asked the same question by a policeman, so it's not nearly as painful for her to be asked by a family member. And
who
as far
puts
as
it on camera?
Why these people, well, they're trying to show you something here. These people couldn't do anything about Melvin just because he had them under a reign of terror and fear. I mean, it's so easy to say, why didn't abuse people strike back against their abuser? And we know from the history of abuse that that's the whole point. You can't. You're powerless. Okay. You're powerless in the face of this monster, and that's what the movie is about.
But why don't they at least get their children away from this guy, which they apparently don't do?
That's why the movie is so amazing. It shows a history, a multi-generational history of abuse in which this one person in this family, without any resources or any escape hatch, was just able to impose his evil will year after year after year.
I think the way it's told is almost as offensive. Okay, coming up next, my video pick of the week is a love letter to baseball.
Ebert and Roeper's Video Pick of the Week is brought to you by Nestle Raisinets. Try Raisinets in new, convenient, resealable bags.
Robert Redford's The Legend of Bagger Vance is new on video and DVD, but a much better sun-dappled sports fable is The Natural, which has been available on video for years, but is just now coming out on DVD. Barry Levinson directs an all-star cast headed by Redford as the legendary Roy Hobbs, an almost supernaturally gifted ball player who throws like lightning and hits like thunder.
Run it by him. Give him a shave with it.
Back one. But then Roy's tragic encounter with a mysterious widow destroys his career before it even begins. He's away from the game for a long time.
Did you ever play organized ball in your life?
I just got back in the game.
What does that mean?
I used to play in high school.
Excuse me?
The Natural is a gorgeous-looking love letter to baseball, with Redford note perfect as the ultimate shining New York Knight, and stellar supporting work from a cast that also includes Kim Basinger and Glenn Close. The DVD also includes a documentary with Cal Ripken Jr., whose insightful, heartfelt comments reveal that he's a major fan of this classic. The Natural is a Hall of Fame sports film, and it's my video pick of the week.
Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this week's show. A major split on Blow with Johnny Depp. Richard thinks it's near great. I tired of the sad sack hero. 2 thumbs up for All Access, the high-energy IMAX concert film. Another big split on Just Visiting. I thought it was bright and funny. Richard thought it was a one-joke disappointment. 2 thumbs down for the convoluted Along Came a Spider. And finally, we split on Just Melvin. Richard had a fundamental objection to the presentation. I thought this movie is one of those incredible documents you can barely imagine being made.